is our society then not much more able to function as individuals and collectively at a higher, more productive level when we have a stable source of sugar going to our brain that supports the brain function? So this has ramifications to a societal level, but also for our diabetics. And I think, Dr. Wellington, the first question I really have for you is, what is insulin resistance and what does that mean at a cellular level to how cells function?
Okay, well, thank you, Rob. And yeah, that's been an interesting discussion so far. And obviously, it's probably going to segue a little bit into what I'm going to be talking about at the World Nutrition Summit. And but I mean, in my understanding, and I'm going to come across here, I'm not the scientist that Prof is, who's done multiple biopsies and that. I'm kind of looking at what I see in patients and that. And I mean, there's no doubt that diabetes patients who are the kind of end stage of metabolic syndrome, who are not well and they don't feel well. I mean, we can say almost with certainty, you know, most diabetics will feel lack of energy, fatigue, not thinking straight, not thinking well, you know, just body aches and pains, just don't feel well. And you know, as we did part of our clinical trial was just looking at insulin levels, and almost all of them had high insulin levels and fasting insulin. We didn't, unfortunately, we didn't have the money to do multiple insulin levels and post and pre meal levels. But what we did see is that patients, obviously there's this issue of hunger. And when you carbohydrate cycling and you're spiking these insulin, you're spiking insulin and then you're dropping your sugar straight afterwards, they continue to be hungry. Whereas we found once patients were converting onto a sort of a low carb diet, and it was actually quite quickly that we would see changes, and I'm sure you've seen in your patients, within days, they would be feeling a lot better. And within days, the actual feeling of wellness would improve. You know, and their sugar levels would come down, and it clearly had an effect on their brain functioning, clearly had an effect on their energy levels, clearly had an effect on their sleep. And so obviously what's happening there, and as you know, we're cutting out the carbs a lot, and we're now trying to get them to utilize other sources of energy. So we're asking them to start eating a bit more fat, protein, and keeping the carbs as low as possible. And it's amazing how quickly the changes happen and how quickly people feel better. So, you know, just from what I'm seeing in patients, the problem really is this high carb diet seems to be pushing up these insulin levels, and they become sustained. And how does that relate to insulin resistance? So in effect, what I've looked at in my little bit of science that I've looked at is this high carb diet tends to, you know, we say, the world says fat's the problem. Well, actually, in some ways it is, because it's the carbohydrate conversion into the liver, and you've shown these things before as well. Diacylglycerol getting packed into the cells and blocking insulin sensitivity. So you're just not able to react to the insulin as well, and to control your glucose level production from your liver, you need to make more and more insulin to control the liver production. And so in a sense, it's a liver that's insulin resistant. And then that translates into the fact that insulin is an anabolic hormone. It grows things. So we see patients becoming more and more fatter. And I know that there obviously other multiple mechanisms, but certainly I see that as the primary mechanism in terms of what I'm seeing, because the moment patients are dropping their carbohydrate level, we saw at the end of our studies that I'm going to be talking about, that the insulin levels were also dropping and they were starting to lose weight. So there must be some correlation there. So the insulin resistance was improving and they were able to access fat now. They weren't blocking the fat breakdown. So that in a sense, so my understanding of insulin resistance and what I'm seeing is really just the fact that the liver is not responding to insulin as well, but actually there's a healing mechanism that takes place and the liver starts to respond better and things start to improve.